The next question is also from Papaltine. Performance question. One of the next items on the tech tree after splitting is data model rework. Have you considered converting parts of the engine to use more data-oriented design patterns as method to improve performance and composability, or might that be overly ambitious? I know Unity has attempted to rebase their whole engine on top of dots while keeping similar OP skin on top of the provided UPatch for against everyone, but they have been at it for several years and have nothing public to show for it as far as I'm aware. So, Resonite, the engine, it actually is heavily sort of data-based. Like, the whole principle of the engine is that data is king. Like, the data says what it is, and then the code is, sort of trying to make it reflect what the data is. And it actually goes, into the synchronization mechanism where the data, like, you always trust the data model. That's like the authority on everything. And then like the code, will make sure to reflect whatever the data says there should be. And that does, have like, it heavily makes things very, like, composable. And that's, the general philosophy we're using for designing things, where a lot of the components, they will interact with the data model. And that's what they care about. They interact with the data model, they modify values a certain way, and then you can have other components that also like listen to those values, or maybe add like other behaviors, and you compose the behaviors you do based on that. That's how a lot of like Froox engine and how like Resonite works is like it is very, very, very heavy on composability, like to the point like where that's why the engine is as flexible as it is thanks to that. It's one of the reasons why you can open Inspector and you can edit anything. Or you can, take protoflags and you can drive anything, you can read anything, you can write anything. That's because it pretty much like, takes the composability to like maximum. That's how it's kind of designed. And it's because everything's designed around the data. There is the other aspect of it, which is like the performance part. That has to do more like, with like doing updates, like especially if we have like lots of the same stuff, being able to like, fill a buffer with things and just like, loop through them, which oftentimes has better performance characteristics, and that is something that we want to do more. There's other parts of the engine like where that is used, where it's gonna like, essentially it fills a buffer with like, sort of state, runs the simulation like oftentimes like in parallel. Like for example, the bones kind of do this, and it's something like we want to like embrace more. But on the surface, it's always gonna be that core data model. That's gonna be more of a background thing where how some of these things execute is over these kind of buffers are like being sort of individual like objects. But yeah, I hope it kind of answers things. Like, there's one thing is like, with how Froox engine works, it's fairly different. Like, it's sort of like with pretty much like every engine, like, out there, their typical approach is, we have the data model for like, the scene or whatever, but it's not synchronized. And usually you tack on the synchronization on top. And it's one of the reasons like you have limitations with those. And the way Resonite, the way Froox engine is designed, it essentially merges the two. It merges like the synchronization with like the data model of the scene. Pretty much like the entire engine is made from the same primitives for synchronization. And everything's kind of built around it. Which it takes a lot of work to do. Like we pretty much like it's one of the reasons why we can't like take a lot of existing solution for things. We have to make our own systems, is because those systems need to be built from the data model primitives that we have, and that's how everything is designed. But the huge benefit is that you get automatic synchronization pretty much for everything. It's gonna make it increases the composability. You can like edit anything, you can like protoflex anything, you can save anything, like everything's persistable. So there's like huge benefits to that kind of approach.